Hello and welcome to another divorce discussion episode. And I am so excited. And it's once again, we have to do the cheer. Yay, Canada, because I have a guest from Canada and a real expert in her field. So, Louisa Jewell is a Canadian leading expert on the science of happiness and thriving. She founded the Canadian Positive Psychology Association in 2012 to bridge the gap between happiness research and practice. She's the host of Audible's The Awesome Project podcast. She's a featured expert in the documentary The Science of Happiness and author of the bestseller Wire Your Brain for Confidence: The Science of Conquering Self-Doubt. Those all sound like phenomenal shows. I got to get in there and listen to your podcast, Louisa.
Thank
So
you.
I always start these interviews out asking people how they got into this area because I think that is a fascinating story in itself. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to become the happiness expert.
Well, so many years ago, about 25 years ago, I found myself in a clinical depression. So I went through a really hard time, and then I suffered through four miscarriages, and I found that I just was not coping well. And I thought I really need to go and seek help. And so I went to see a counselor, and seeing the counselor was really helpful. It brought me out of my clinical depression and feeling okay and feeling like I could cope well. And then, something would happen and I'd be back, in the office again. And I finally said to my counselor, I said, look, I need to know how to maintain my own mental health. I need to know how to maintain my happiness levels because I can't keep running back to you every time something happens. And I knew he was reframing thoughts and doing things like that. So I asked him for some books, and he actually led me to a few books written by Dr. Martin Seligman, who is the founding father of the field of positive psychology. And that is the scientific study of well-being and happiness and human thriving. And I thought, wow, there is a whole science behind
Right.
this. And I love learning about science. And I love that there's science behind it as well, which really interested and fascinated me. And so I applied to go and get into his master's degree at the University of Pennsylvania. And I got in and I read over 6,000 pages of research, and I applied everything I learned to myself. And I never fell into a depression again.
Wow. And
And yeah.
what a great story. I mean, that's a powerful testimonial for the whole process, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. And to have that kind of power, to understand the things that you can do. Our happiness levels are affected by our DNA. They are, in a small way affected by our circumstances. But, about 40% of our happiness on average, not for everybody, but on average, there's a lot we can do that, we can affect kind of that 40% of our happiness levels and our well-being levels, with things that we do, things that, activities we engage in, different perspectives we put on, how we think about things, how we manage emotions, how we manage relationships. These are all things that we can be doing that can contribute to our happiness and our health.
Sure. And I appreciate you saying that because so many people are like, well, I can't control the weather. I can't control, if my ID is going to get stolen and people drain my bank account. No, but
Yeah.
you can, how you, how you react to it is something you can control, right?
Exactly. That is exactly it. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting, if somebody does hack into your bank account, that's really scary. That happened to a friend of mine recently, and I think they took like $30,000 or something. And it was awful. It was, she was really upset by it. So, I'm not suggesting that, oh, we just need, somebody just stole $30,000. Let me be happy. Because I,
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of people think, that we just go around telling everybody it's okay, but instead what we say is, no, let's think about what are the strategies I can use to, first of all, get into action to solve the problem, to figure out what happened, to figure out, is there anything I can do to recover that money, whatever the case may be. And then what are the strategies I can put into place to bounce back from, something like this that happens, so that it helps me just to get back on track and allows me to live my life, as this problem is going on, that it
Right.
doesn't become all consuming.
So, and this is that's a really good segue into, this podcast, this YouTube, a divorce discussions conversation. A lot of people listening to this are going to be contemplating in or post divorce. And that can be like, I've had people say, like, all the joy is sucked out of my life since I've gone through the divorce. And so, as a divorce coach, I don't do the mental health side of it, but we do. You can't let something like that dictate how you're going to experience joy and satisfaction and a sense of purpose and all those good things in life. So, what do you say
Yeah.
to people who are going through something like a divorce, or like you had to experience, a miscarriage or the loss of a child or something like that, that's really more than just a financial impact on your life or something? How does this apply to them?
Well, I actually went through a separation and an almost divorce. And I say that because, a couple of years into my separation, we weren't legally divorced. My husband, who was a very good friend, um, got sick and developed a brain tumor, and we got back together. And, my kids and I, we took care of him until he died. So it was a divorce, separation, divorce, then it was the trauma of the brain tumor, and so that's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot to
yeah.
process. Now, when I first went through a divorce, I thought to myself, well, divorce is hard, but it's not that hard, like it's going to be okay, until I went through the divorce, and it was devastating. And when I took a look at the well-being research, I thought, why? Why is divorce such a devastating thing for our happiness and our joy? And here's why. Because divorce, one thing that's really important to our happiness is our relationships. If there's, we have many pillars of, that contribute to happiness. The relationship pillar is the key and the most important pillar. And there's longevity studies, there's hundreds and hundreds of studies that will show you that relationships are the most important thing to our happiness levels. And what does divorce do? Divorce jeopardizes every single relationship we
Hmm.
have. Am I even going to have custody of my kids anymore?
Right.
Will I even be able to see my kids? There are some people who have those threats, right?
Hmm.
Your in-laws hate your guts now, right? And you're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
invited to Thanksgiving and Christmas. And, thankfully that was not my case, but everybody else I know, that's what happens. You know, um, your partner's gone. This person that you loved, I loved my partner. I didn't want to get a divorce.
Hmm.
And suddenly, they're not there. I remember the first day looking, in the bed at the pillow and it's empty,
Hmm.
and it was, oh, like that was just such a hard day for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
And so, one of the things that I did when I knew that, when I knew I was going to go through a divorce, is I thought I need to have practices in place to keep me, healthy and to help me process this. And so I exercise every day. That exercise can really be helpful for your brain, for your happiness. But one of the things I did, because sometimes we can stress ourselves out by, a real kind of big workout, like a CrossFit workout or something. So what I did was I went to hot yoga for an hour every day for 2 years,
Love hot
every
yoga.
single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Me too. I loved it. And I'd get in and you turn your phone is in the other room, locked in the locker. It's 1 hour of embodied meditation. You're in a warm, hot room, so you feel like you're in Mexico, like you're feeling that warmth. And that was my 1 hour. And sometimes I would just go and cry.
Hmm.
I cried. And then, you're in the hot room, so nobody knows. They just think you're sweating. You
Right.
know what I mean? But sometimes I just needed to cry for an hour, and I'd go and cry it out and wipe my tears and leave. And another practice that I did every single day when I did yoga is there was a move that bothered my knee. So I never did this move. So while everyone else was doing that move, I would sit with my hands on my heart, and I would close my eyes, and I would relive the day, and I would talk to myself like as if my best, most compassionate friend saw my day. And they would say things like, Louisa, wow, like you were so patient with your daughter when she was yelling at you about something. Like, good for you. Good for you. Good for you that you didn't react to that email today. That shows a lot of strength. I'm so proud of you that you did that speaking engagement, despite the fact that you had a really hard day the night before. And that was just a practice. And I didn't say it out loud. It was just to myself
Right.
in my head. I just spoke to myself every day like that compassionate person. And that is one of the tools that we use in happiness and in positive psychology, is to speak to yourself kindly. And that really, really helped me get through. So, if people are going through a really difficult divorce, I want you to think of like 2 or 3 or 4 strategies, things that you're going to be doing for yourself to take care of yourself, because it's hard. And recognize, be mindful of your suffering and take care of yourself as you do it, but put things proactively into place
Yeah.
to make sure that you're doing those things.
And I love that, like you said, just speaking compassionately to yourself, because our little inner critic is just yapping away all the time, right? So hearing that, I need to ask you a question, because people quite often, I think, there's a whole toxic positivity
Yes,
issue. So can you, because that's not what you're talking about, can you
exactly.
explain what toxic positivity is and why it's so potentially dangerous for people to engage in those kind of practices or ideas or
Yeah.
thoughts or whatever?
Well, this is the idea that I hate that word should, be happy all the time, right? Like nothing should bother me. And, if you were really happy, you would learn how to not let anything bother you, or whatever. And it's just not realistic. Or, somebody is telling you that they were diagnosed with breast cancer, and you go, well, look on the bright side, you've got great doctors. And that doesn't honor the person, and what they're going through. And so I think this kind of, toxic positivity, or let's always look on the bright side. If I'm in a plane, I actually want to have a pessimistic pilot who's going to say, you know what, maybe we should de-ice the wings one more time because I'm not sure. Like, I'd rather have that kind of, so we have to be selective. When do I need to have my pessimistic hat on? Because I really need to be looking at, the worst case scenario so I can prepare for those, in important situations. That's better, than just saying, oh, everything's going to be fine and I don't have to have a plan B.
Yeah.
So, I think, this idea, and also people who strive to be happy all the time, in fact, are less happy than people who just live their lives. And I think what is important to note is that really a life that is rich with experiences, whether they are sad experiences or challenging experiences or happy or loving or frustrating, you know, that's a really interesting life. And in the long term, that is going to make for a much more satisfying life than one where we're just happy all the time, and, nothing's going to affect us. So I
Yeah.
think it's, yeah, I think it's And I think it's appropriate, if your dog dies, it's appropriate for you to be sad. It's not even appropriate for you to be happy.
Yeah. And I think, and we could go off on another tangent on this, but that whole, because I taught school for years and years and years, and this, that whole helicopter parent, where they got their kid
Yeah.
wrapped in bubble wrap, the kid never experiences any difficulties, any challenges, mom and dad solve all the problems for them, typically
Yeah.
mom, but not always, solves all the problems, and then all of a sudden this kid gets to like college and fails a class and their world falls apart because they have no, or somebody says something critical to them and they just fall apart because they've got no experience. So I that really resonated with me, that a life well lived is going to have some challenges and some sorrows and
Yeah.
some difficult times. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And so if parents, I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry,
go ahead.
please go ahead.
No, and if parents are always see, because their parents want to protect their kids' happiness, they don't want any little thing to make them uncomfortable. But what they don't realize is that they're not teaching their kids how to deal
Yeah.
with those things.
Yeah.
So there's two things. There's when you help your kids solve their own problems, they're learning number one, problem solving skills. But number two, they're actually gaining in confidence that they can solve their own problems. And that can be even more important than the solving the problem, because we don't always know how to solve the problem. But if we feel confident that no matter what happens to us, we can figure it out, then imagine how much less stress you're going to experience, because you're going to say to yourself, no matter what happens, I got it. I can figure it out. If I can't figure it out, I'll ask somebody else.
Yeah. Oh, this is such a positive message. Here we are talking about this. Because I think that no matter how difficult a situation can be, there may be a time in the future. It may not be next month. It may not be 6 months. It may not be, 5 years, but at some point in time, you're going to be able to look back on that. And there's going to be some knowledge of yourself, something that you're going to look back and think, I did that really well. I didn't think I could handle that, but I did it really well. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, is having that ability to have that positive nature in yourself to be able to do
Yeah,
that. So
absolutely.
this has been absolutely a fascinating conversation, and I have a feeling we need to talk again soon. By the
Okay,
way,
let's do it.
so
Let's do it.
Louisa, what do you think is the most important thing that you want people to remember after this very brief conversation that we had today?
I think what is really important is that piece of self-compassion. I think that as we go through, especially when you go through a divorce, there can be feelings of blame. There can be, and there's nothing to be blamed about. But there's so many emotions. And I think the more you can practice self-compassion, understand not just about speaking kind to yourself, but understand that, there are thousands, millions of people who go through a divorce. You are not alone. You're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. You are, perfectly flawed, like everybody, like all of us are perfectly flawed. And I think if people can remember that, I think it will be so helpful as they
Yeah,
go through a
yeah.
divorce.
Great message. Also, if people want to reach out, find out more about what you do, or just learn more about you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
So they can go to my website, louisajewell.com.
Okay, wonderful.
Jewel, that's Jewel with two L's.
Jewel with two L's. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'll make sure all that information gets in the notes underneath here. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really, like I said, it's been really positive, but it's also been, I think, really authentic, that we can have our emotions. I really appreciate that.
Yes,
So
yes,
thank you
exactly.
so
Well,
much,
thank
Louisa.
you.
Really
Well,
appreciated
thank
this.
you. Thank you, Marty. It's been great to talk to you.